Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming along to Morris & Sons this morning. It's wonderful to have such a big crowd here. Jake, welcome. Thank you for coming along today. Now, for anyone who hasn't come across you and your work yet, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a knitting designer and fibre artist. I live here in Sydney. I've been knitting and writing knitting patterns since about 2004, I think, which is a lot longer than I've sort of had success in it, if that makes sense. But the most popular of those has really been the building block designs, and they started in about 2018.
And what got you into knitting in the first place? Where did that all start?
So my mum was a really prolific knitter, and growing up I always saw her knitting something. I have this very vivid memory in the first home that I grew up in. Mum had knitted the curtains in our living room, and they
wow, we're all going wow.
Yeah. I actually, a few years ago, I wasn't sure that could be a real memory, if that makes sense. Somebody was talking about knitting objects for the house, and I thought that can't. I seem to remember that we did have knitted curtains, but that can't be true. And I checked with members of my family, and they said, no, you absolutely did. They were really long, kind of webbed, brown, quite fluffy wool. And I remember every time we had really hot days, Mum would worry that they shouldn't be in the sun, so she would put them to the side. But they were beautiful, and Mum was always knitting something, making kind of some kind of object, usually clothing for herself or for family members. And so when you see somebody sort of making things in a particular way very frequently, it often catches on. And so eventually I learned from her, and I didn't pick it up right away. It took a little bit longer to get into it. A friend of mine was making a scarf, and I really liked what she was making, and I said, can you show me how to do that? And she did, and I think that's really where I started taking the initiative to make some of my own designs, and that was in the early 2000s.
Right, okay. So you probably had some of those skills that you picked up from Rome just locked away in there, ready for the moment.
It's one of those things. There are only a limited number of stitches you can perform in knitting, and once you know how to do each of them, everything else is possible. And so I had learned, I think, all of the basic skills, and then it was really just a matter of thinking about how to apply those to different things I wanted to make.
I know you have a desk job.
Yes.
Full-time job. How do you manage to then fit all of this sort of creativity and designing and knitting around your work?
Well, it's just the spare time. It's all of the bits in between. My day job is a great. It's a totally different way of using my brain. It's quite analytical and kind of focused on information rather than the creative expression, and that's they kind of balance each other nicely. It means I get to take my brain to different places and work in different ways.
A big turning point, I think. So you learned how to knit from your mom, and then your friend sort of inspired you to get going, and then Copenhagen was quite a pivotal moment in your journey.
It was, and actually there's a fairly important step in there that I probably haven't talked about much, and but I did actually publish a booklet of patterns with Panda yarns in 2007 or 8, I think. I should probably remember the year, but it was called Little and Friends, and it was a little kind of character knits, which I had been working on very early, and that was great. It was a really great experience, but then there was quite a long time off. Once that was sort of finished, I had just started my teaching career, and anybody who knows teachers or is a teacher knows their lives are very full with the job that they do. There's not much other time. And so there was a number of years where I was really focusing on that only. And then in 2018, my partner Luke moved to Copenhagen for work, and I thought this is probably too good an opportunity to go somewhere and live somewhere else and spend some time doing something else to not do it. So I did, and it was fantastic. And so I had a lot of spare time there. I was also working as a casual teacher, but that wasn't every day. So it was a great opportunity to focus on making more creative projects. And the inspiration for Copenhagen really came from the time I spent wandering around the city and exploring different neighborhoods and looking at the buildings there. Anybody who's been to Copenhagen, you will know it's just an incredible city visually, in all ways, but visually as well. And it's hard not to feel this sense of inspiration, I suppose, about the way that the city's organized and the way that the buildings kind of line the streets in this very ordered way. It's really, there's something really lovely about that. And I wanted to capture it, and yeah, that's a part of how I started on the journey for the blanket.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I've been to so many cities and looked at buildings, and I've never thought to knit them. Like, what can you define that moment when you're like looking at a building and going, I want to knit you?
Yeah. It's yes.
Was there a particular building?
There were a couple. There was one that I used to walk past from our apartment building to the nearest train station. It was maybe a kilometre and a half between home and the nearest train station, and I had to get to that train station in order to get into the city to do anything useful. So I would always pass this building, and it was a kind of faded mustard yellow. It was a really simple colour, but it was so beautiful, and the way that it lit up what was otherwise a fairly ordinary building just always really struck me. There's also this thing about a lot of the buildings in Copenhagen where, this sounds silly because a lot of buildings have like regulated windows, but all of the windows in Copenhagen buildings are quite big, and they're very, they form grids. So the windows always line up with each other across floors. You don't really get irregularities in the placement of windows. Everything is very considered. I don't really know exactly why the organization part, except that it seems like a really good design choice. The size of the windows is, I think, about letting as much light into buildings as possible, because there are times in the year when that is a very rare resource. So they do like to get as much of it in as possible. But then there's something about seeing the beauty of that ordered design that made me think that would work in knitting. Yeah. That would work in Colourwork, because you're trying to line things up in a very regulated way. And then I think, like all inspiration, whenever I have an idea that I think could work, I have to keep testing it until it either works or it fails. And I just kept testing it until it worked. And so I liked what I had done, and I posted a few photos early on when I was working on some of the blocks for the blanket. And there was a really positive response from people online, and a few people whose work I really regarded highly as well said, "You should make patterns out of these. I would really like to make that." And I thought, well, if you would like to make it, then I feel like I should keep going. And I did make a pattern. I actually made the patterns before I finished the blanket, and posted them. And then that was a good motivator to finish. So that's how it came about.
Fantastic. And you mentioned the colour that you were really drawn to. What resources or what knitting shops did you have in Copenhagen to be able to get the right colour?
A few really good ones. So actually a large portion of why I was thinking of buildings in the first place was there's a store in Copenhagen. It's actually like a chain homeware store. It's called Søstrene Grene. It's like it's not a discount store exactly, but it's a very affordable homeware store, and they sell homewares, but also a range of like crafting supplies. And they have a really big collection of cotton, a really big collection of, well, not a big collection, but a collection of wool, and they run different lines every year. So I had seen all of these cottons, and some of them are just the most beautiful colors. A lot of them ended up in the blanket actually. So like this pink at the top of this building, I think, is one of them. And you see it quite a few times throughout the blanket. This green is another one. And they're just kind of these bright colors, but also a bit muted. And I'd never seen so many really beautifully curated colors in cotton before. And I started buying them before I knew what I was going to do with them. And then eventually the whole thing came together. So that was the main source. But there's also a great store. I mean, there are a number of really great yarn stores in Copenhagen, but another one that I spent a bit of time in is called Sommerfuglen, which means butterfly, literally summer bird, but it means butterfly. And they're actually kind of like the Morris & Sons of Copenhagen. They're in the center of the city. If you're looking for yarn there, you really can't miss them. And they just have a really beautiful collection of things. And yeah, loads of 4-ply cotton at the time anyway. I don't know if they still do.
Yeah. But they had what you needed.
Yeah.
I love that line where you bought it before you knew what you were going to do with it. I think that resonates with a lot of us.
Yeah.
We're like, oh good, we're not the only one.
Yeah. I think because that's part of what that creativity looks like, right? You kind of lean into the thing that makes you feel positively about something, even if you don't know what that thing is. And so a lot of the colors I was collecting, because some of them, when I went looking for colors for the blanket, I realized this won't work in the blanket, but I still really like the color, so it might work for something else, and I can't not take it now that it's in front of me.
It's an investment in your future, right? It's like
it really is. There's no worse feeling than knowing that you want to go back for a particular color or a particular yarn, and the store that you went to doesn't have it, and then you can't get it because it was the end of a line or something. So just
you
buy
see
it while
it,
you can.
love it, buy it.
We went back actually a couple of Christmases ago, and I said to Luke, we really need to be prepared. I'm going to make lots of opportune purchases here. So yeah, a lot of yarn came back with us, but that's good.
Yeah,
It's been
I agree.
positive.
I agree. That's good. That's good.
I will say actually, in terms of collecting colors, I brought a couple of my sample cards with me, just because I haven't got. I looked for the Copenhagen one, but I can't find it. But when I'm collecting colors for a project, I start a little sort of sample card of each of the colors and carry it with me when I go shopping to make sure that I can test each of the colors in the set. I try not to buy all of the colors up front, because I want it to evolve as I make it. Sometimes it's the opposite, and I want everything decided first. But having that sample card to sort of build the set out of is a really good way of seeing, is this something that's going to work in this particular project? So yeah.
I actually think that's a great idea. I'm now thinking, why don't I do that instead of carrying balls of yarn to match up? Why don't I just take...
So just on that point, this yellow, it comes from, it's the Rowan Summerlight 4-ply. And I got that when we were in the year we were in Copenhagen, and I was looking for extra colors, and we took a trip to London at Easter. And I just thought, well, this would be a great way to incorporate more yarns from the trip and to sort of expand the souvenir of the blanket to more time spent there, to collect some things from elsewhere. So yeah, that's where that one. And when I saw it in the store and had the card with me, I just thought, I haven't got anything that bright in there, but that's what pops. That's what makes it pop.
It's beautiful. It really pops. When you see it there, it's probably one of the most poppiest colors, isn't it?
I was very intent when we were working on the cover image to make sure we got some of that yellow in it, because it lifts the other blocks. So
no, it's fantastic.
I know we're talking a lot about color, but
I love talking about colors.
I do want to say is I actually also do something that probably not a lot of people are keen on, but I sometimes stain and fade particular colors, because it can be really hard to get multiple tones of the same color. You can sometimes get a light and a medium, or a light and a dark of one color, but it can be hard to get like variation in tone. I started when we were in Copenhagen doing some acrylic stain wash over the top of cotton, so kind of wind off a certain amount of cotton from the ball that I knew I would need to make a block, and then make it like an acrylic wash, and then kind of soak the yarn in the acrylic wash, and then wring it out and rinse it and make sure the color had fixed. And then what you get is variations of the same thing. So if I start with like a grey and I put a black wash through it, it just darkens the grey so that you can sit 3 greys next.
Have you done that there? Is it those
Possibly. I don't remember exactly, but it could be. That could be an example of it. The other one I was looking at here, this is a different process, but this block here, I believe that yarn is a brown. I don't think it's in the blanket elsewhere, but it was a kind of chocolate brown color, also from Søstre Grena, and I made a very weak bleach wash. So diluted bleach very, very lightly, and then sat the wound off yarn into that, and then counted to 15, and then I didn't want to leave it in too long, and then took it out and put it straight into a vinegar wash to stop the process. And the result was I mean, when I got the yarn out, I thought, oh no, it's all patchy. It's maybe not going to work very well. But then,
actually, it
of
works
course,
really well.
Yeah, because it gives that lovely kind of brick texture to the surface. But the number of experiments that worked with colour are equal to the number that didn't work. So you just have to be prepared that it's not always, doesn't always work. And it doesn't work with every cotton either, depending on the way that the dye is fixed to the cotton and whether or not it's had, you know, like sealing processes over the top. Some things take, some things don't take. So
wow,
it's
that
all
is
experimentation.
Fascinating part of your process. I love it, because I was going to ask specifically about Colourwork, because the colours, I think, first of all, your designs are beautiful, the structure of them, but then how you sort of layer the colours throughout is what makes them work so well. But I think you've covered everything on colour. It's really great, and I love the little the wrapping technique.
Yeah.
You did a piece inspired by Wes Anderson's Grand Budapest Hotel. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty simple story, really. I really love Wes Anderson's work. I think there's not many people who don't. And the film for the Grand Budapest Hotel focuses really heavily on this particular building. And some of the images that they use throughout the film of the building are these sort of 2D model renderings of it that make it look like it's a part of a storybook. It's such a beautiful idea, and watching it made me think that's quite similar to what I'm making here, is these kind of picture book illustrations of buildings. And then the premise of the film is all of the stories that occur in the hotel and how these people's lives kind of pass through it. And that is really also what, I guess what people see in a lot of the building designs that I do, is people attach them to particular times and places, and that looks just like the place I lived in, or you know, people often want to make the places they lived in, and that's a really lovely way that the buildings kind of communicate those ideas. So I think once the idea struck me for the Grand Hotel, I thought I just have to do it now. It's like the building idea itself. Once the idea lodges, I either have to make it work or see that it won't work, and then that's what we get. Yeah,
it's lovely, so nice. Well, we'll just move straight on to the book. Congratulations.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah.
Knit the City. It's amazing. It has been an absolute success. Just everybody has loved it. It's been fantastic. I know it's been a long time in the making. This is your first big book launch.
Yeah.
How was the process? Maybe you can talk us through, you know, how long it's taken and what's been involved.
Sure. It's been a great process. Not every step has been great. It has been a real challenge at times. It's just over 2 years now since I started talking with the publisher about it, and we did begin pretty quickly after we reached an idea. The idea development phase was really interesting because I had approached the project with a pretty open mind about what I wanted to do, but I also had a clear idea of the way that my patterns work and the way I wanted them represented in any book form. The publisher naturally brings a different angle to it. They want to give customers as much of what they want as possible, and they also want things to be, it's not that they follow a formula, but they know the elements that work in other books and they want to reproduce those as much as possible. Well, that's my sense of the relationship. So then we had to negotiate between those two kind of angles or aims, and I think what we ended up with is a really faithful result according to all of our needs. I guess we started from the premise that it would not be just about one city. It would probably be multiple cities that we were including, but that it would be the city blocks. And I didn't want the book to be a kind of reproduction of the patterns that I already have published myself, because I thought that isn't really a new product. That's just the same product turned into another format, which if you had already bought the other patterns, you might not think was a wonderful idea. But also I wanted it to be about not giving absolutely everything to make an exact reproduction of another object, but giving all of the components that you needed to come up with something that is entirely yours. Some of my favorite creative books growing up and even today are ones where you start with an idea, or the book presents a way to do something and shows you the basics of how to build a result, but doesn't give you sort of a formula for building an exact product. I know that's often quite anti-knitting. Knitting patterns are very, begin this way, use this yarn, use these needles, produce this exact result, and if you don't, then hold the pattern accountable. And it's not that I dislike that. I understand why that's a really important part of knitting patterns. It's just not the way that these particular patterns work. And so I wanted it to stay really playful and interchangeable, and the publisher was great about that. That's very much the result we've got. So
And I think it's lovely because in a way you're handing control back to the knitter. You're saying, here's all the skills, but now you know, you've got the driver's seat. You can make what you want of it. And I think that's lovely. I think quite often knitters don't get that freedom from patterns, and you know, why not? Why not choose your own colours and mix up your blocks, or you know?
And I enjoy the knitting part of the work, but one of the parts that I know I enjoyed the most about each of the projects is the design, coming up with the possible designs, and the pleasure of combining things that you didn't think would necessarily go together, and then coming up with something even better. And if I just say, here are the, you know, 36 block patterns that you will need to make this exact blanket, then I kind of I shortcut that pleasure and go straight to the product. And I know that if people can build those results themselves, they might experience some of that same pleasure of doing the combining and feeling that the thing that they've made is actually different from mine, but also great and entirely theirs. So I hope that's something people get from it.
Completely unique. I think that's lovely. Unique and personal to them.
Yeah.
So you've got 7 cities in the book.
Yes.
How did you land on those? There's a lot of cities to choose from out there.
So as I said, Copenhagen was the first one I had worked on, and I did already have patterns out for 4 of the cities before I started work on the book. So Copenhagen was done. The next one I did was Amsterdam, and that was actually a commission for a company that does the art curation for cruise ships. And they had a cruise ship that for the Holland America line, I think, and they travel always through Amsterdam, or the particular route that this ship takes will always travel through Amsterdam. And they commissioned a really big piece. It's just one strip of the Grachtenpanden, the buildings in Amsterdam. So that was that one, and that was those patterns. And then Sydney was third, which I made obviously because this is where I live, and a large portion of my sort of 20s have been spent growing up living in the townhouses of Sydney. So that seemed like an obvious next step. And then I worked on the Paris blocks as a really big, kind of bigger scale version of the same idea. So those ones were taken care of. They seemed to me to be natural inclusions if they were already working. And the publisher said, I mean, they were keen for as much as I was willing to include, but I didn't want the book to be overwhelming. I want there to be enough options that you see that you can make lots of different things, but I don't want people to feel that there are 7 or 8 possible projects and they're really not going to complete all of those. So we settled on New York, London and Prague as the other 3. New York and London were, I know that a large portion of my audience up to the point that I started writing the book were American and British, and so New York and London seemed like fairly good inclusions in terms of that market. But also the buildings of New York and London, the ones that I went with, are really distinct. New York, as you can see in the pillow, is all of these kind of earth tones. And I thought that was a really good opportunity to do something quite different from all of the other building designs that I'd done, working with a very particular palette of colours, minor variations in buildings, but really distinct differences. And then the London blanket, which is just behind me here, you might not be able to see very clearly. Again, it's about the row houses of London, which there are lots of different styles, and I thought that would make a really lovely inclusion. The difference is that often in London you don't get lots of different styles lined up in a particular street. You get whole streets in a very similar style. And that's possible to do in a blanket as well, but I didn't think that the effect of that would be as nice as having a kind of a range of them spread across the blanket. So I've spotted them around a little bit, but obviously it would be great to see. I'd love to see a whole blanket done, for example, in that kind of the sort of Regency style white and tan front. I think that would look really great. I'd love to do it myself at some point, but I try not to come back to patterns too often if I can avoid it. So yeah, and then Prague was actually a suggestion of the publisher. It's not that I wasn't interested. Prague is a really beautiful city, but the patterns for Prague took me a fair bit longer to get underway.
You obviously have to go to all of these cities.
We'll have to at some point.
Oh, so you haven't been to the cities during the design process?
No, not during the design process. The only city that I haven't been to in the book is New York. But obviously that would be a lovely trip to do. Yeah, and I think that that didn't necessarily limit how I approached the patterns. It just meant that I had to do a lot of online research I knew the types of buildings I was looking at, but I had to actually kind of look up to make sure that what I was doing matched what I thought I was doing, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's funny, particularly with London and New York, so much of my conception of those cities is built out of TV and film. And so I had to check that the reference points I had weren't sort of fictionalized references rather than real ones. But for Prague, it was actually probably one of the most difficult cities in the book to design, just because it has some of the more ornate components. I suppose to look at in the end, it doesn't necessarily feel that way, but particularly the tops of the buildings and the bottoms of the buildings are quite unique from the other cities. And so, getting those right took a long time. Often I'll draw something and think, yep, that looks right, happy, done, and then I start knitting it and realize I've put stitches in places I can't make them. The color, I can't carry colors to that point to do what I want to do, or if I do, it pulls things out of shape. So it was a lot of trial and error with Prague.
Interesting. Because most of your, I guess, details comes from literally just stitches and colour work. That's how you're planning it all.
Yeah, I try to keep it as simple as possible in terms of the way that the design is produced. It doesn't always work like that. Sometimes it's a little bit more complex. But particularly for Sydney, the ironwork balconies was a new feature that I hadn't worked with before. But I like how in these it is another opportunity to spread colour. Before I began doing the knitted blankets, I had done a number of patchwork blankets, and I had a really great teacher in patchwork quilting, and my friend Elizabeth, and she explained lots of principles of patchwork quilting to me, but one of them was about the way that you organise colour in a big field of lots of colour. She talked to me a lot about Kay Fassett's work and how he often uses a ridiculous number of colours, but somehow manages to get your eye to pull around to all of them and value each of them equally. And one of the ways that I've tried to kind of use colour in the projects is in a similar way, to make sure that every colour is used at least 3 times, for example, because if your eye finds a colour, there's something that happens in your brain that says that can't be the only instance of that colour, and you're naturally already looking for another instance of the same colour or a colour that's similar, and where you can use those to sort of draw the eye around the work without letting it rest in a particular spot. You typically get a result that feels a bit more vibrant. Yes. So that's one of the principles I try to keep in mind.
Yeah, really interesting, fascinating. And this is Sydney that we're sitting in front of.
Yes.
Any buildings of significance in here?
A couple, yeah. So as I said, I've lived in a couple of terraces. The one that is probably most significant is this one here. So in my 20s, I lived with a few friends who are effectively members of my family now, in a place in Chippendale on Abercrombie Street. And I made this when I was working on the blanket. I thought, well, I can't not have our house in there. So this one is based on that. And actually the design at the top is, I sort of used that as the basis for one of the designs that went into the online patterns. But this window in here is not one of the patterns, either in the online one or in here. It's just one, it's only slight differences, but I wanted it to be a unique piece that was for our house. And when we had the launch here a week or so ago, a couple of weeks ago now, some of my former housemates were there, and they picked it out in the blanket and said, that's our place.
That's very, very cool.
Yeah, actually the way they knew, they said, that's our place. I said, how do you know? And they said, oh, because that's Sophia's window.
I love it.
Yeah. That's
so nice. So if we move on to yarn, so you mostly use cotton.
Yes.
Any other fibres that you like to work with?
The reason I use cotton now, I like the way that it drapes, I like the weight of it, I like that it's a sort of matte finish in all. There's not the same kind of fuzz or fluff to the surface of it. Wool is beautiful and it produces lots of really lovely things. I just took to cotton really well. The fact that I can also adjust the colour easily is a big factor, but then the other factor is once you build enough of a collection of something, you kind of can't use it. You can't use it up, I mean. You have to keep adding to it and building that same collection.
Yes.
So it's not apathy now, it's just that's kind of where it's landed. But yeah, other fibers, yes, but mainly for other projects. So yeah, I made a jumper a few years ago from a Danish designer's pattern, and it was made in alpaca. Which is beautiful to work with, very sticky on the fingers. I don't know if that makes sense to everyone, but it's really lovely and soft, but also you feel almost like it can be matting as you work with it.
Yeah, it can be like
felting.
that. And very different from you, like normally working with cotton to then working with alpaca, that would feel very different.
If you make a mistake halfway through a block in cotton and you have to unwind most of the block, you get a little bit of like wiggle in the yarn that you pull out, but it's all reusable without a doubt. That you don't get knotting or things kind of felting together along the way. You don't have to carefully, pry two pieces of yarn apart that have joined to each other. Cotton is a lot more forgiving in that way.
Okay, so you do like to knit other things, not just you knit garments?
Not a lot. I have.
Okay.
I have. It's one of the things, I don't know if everybody finds this about knitting garments, but one of the things that I don't like about it is you think you've taken all of the measurements exactly as they should be, and then you get near to finishing and you have this moment where you think, that's not the right size. I've made that just entirely the wrong size. And
everyone's nodding.
And I'll have to undo the entire thing and start again. I might need more yarn.
Yeah.
And then you do it again and you think, maybe I don't need more yarn after all. I find it's a really difficult guessing game, and I can't trust the pattern or myself midway through to know that it's right.
Yeah.
And I find that a very uncomfortable process. So I do sometimes knit garments, but not as often as things where the size is up to me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think, we're all with you on that. We've all been there. So what do you have on the needles at the moment? And do you have anything new and exciting you could maybe give us a sneak peek?
I do. So on the city theme as well, I have been thinking about other ways to sort of represent cities or represent aspects of cities. Buildings are lovely and I will probably keep making them, but also when you do enough of something, you often want a bit of a rest. So I have been working on the Tokyo Trains blanket, which I'll hold up for you.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's very cool.
We need a city range of that.
That's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's effectively the same pattern for each train, just changing colours. But all of the stripes, each stripe is a different train line in Tokyo.
It's very neat.
Yeah, thank you. So that's, I have finished it, I just need to write the pattern for it.
There you go, you saw it here first, Tokyo Trains.
And hopefully I'll put that out later in the year. Once everything on the book is sort of out in the world and ready, then I can move on to focusing on a few other things.
Yeah. So just to finish up, back to the book again, I would say because you've got a range of projects in there, it's probably suitable for a range of experience of knitters. Who would you suggest would be able to knit the patterns in your book?
If you're working from the book by itself, it's probably best to have some experience in knitting. That is, if you buy the book and you're working alone from the book, you would probably want to have already a bit of experience in knitting. If you don't, you would probably want to learn some basic knitting stitches from somebody else. But the colour work in it, if you're willing to use a little bit of YouTube and reading the instructions in the book together, I think the colour work isn't as complicated as it looks. I know to look at the designs there's a lot going on, so it seems like there's a lot of detail and it seems like you'll never really be able to get everything in its place. But the sort of trick of the designs is that everything is done in rows. I mean, that's not a trick, that's how knitting works, but the trick of the eye maybe is that you forget that everything's done in rows and you start to look at the features individually. But actually, if you work from the bottom, you're doing rows of grey, rows of the background colour. You're integrating a few different colours at different points, but most of the time you're only working in two colours, and for about 30% of the time you're only working in one colour. So it's really about very sparingly using colours to pick out particular details. So in that sense, you don't need to be an advanced knitter to be able to attempt a lot of the colour work.
Maybe advanced beginner. Like you have to be comfortable knitting and have, I would say, some experience in colour work, I would say.
I usually say intermediate knitting is the sort of, if you feel relatively comfortable with knitting and you want to try something a little bit further, then it's good. Also, the worst that can happen is you don't make it as you were hoping to, and then you can read more about how to do it and watch lots more videos. And before I made the Copenhagen blanket, I had made a few small colourwork pieces, and I got really excited about the idea of producing kind of more patterned images in my knitting, and then I started on the building blocks. So it's not that there's not a big jump between quite simple colourwork techniques and a lot of what I'm doing here.
And it's nice because they are modular, they're small little projects.
Yeah.
Everyone needs something that they can put in their handbag and take, and just, bring out whenever they want. Jumpers get very big when you're, So it's perfect little project.
A lot of the blocks never get heavy. Before there's any weight on your needles, you're casting off. And I like that. I like being able to achieve small things at a time and then stack them up and then realize, oh, I've got almost a blanket here.
Yeah. Just going to throw in one last thing. Can you give us a tip? Can you give a tip whenever you're doing colour work and you want to balance make sure that your floats are sort of the right length, and you're balancing the gauge between, I guess, solid colour and colour work. Do you have any tips for that?
It's a really good question. I find with cotton it's not as much of a problem as it is with wool. So I know sometimes with wool you get a different gauge between plain stockinette stitch in one colour, and when you do colour work where it tends to be tighter, it can bunch in. So sometimes people will change the size of needles doing colour work in wool. I have never had that problem with cotton, but the other piece of advice I have is really pull at the edges of every row. So once you finish a row, stop and just give it a really good yank on both sides, stretch it further than you think it should go, and then pull it top to bottom as well. It just helps to spread all of the yarn out a bit more evenly in every stitch. And for some reason the cotton really likes that treatment. Because it doesn't have as much give, it just helps to distribute the yarn a bit more evenly.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Fantastic. Well, I've got to the bottom of all of my questions. If anyone has anything else they'd like to ask.
Is this because it was completed in 2018?
Yeah.
Roman numerals? That's a lovely touch.
Yeah, thank you. I try to add little personalised pieces to all of the blankets. I should say most of the blankets and most of the pieces. The other one in Sydney, it's in the same location, but slightly smaller. You can see I put my initials into the ironwork here, and then the year across the top, just 22. So, because I think there's something really lovely about stamping the work. You don't put all of that time in to then not look at it later and say, when did I make that? Or,
completely. Yeah. My memory, I can't remember.
Again, that's something I've sort of brought over from the patchwork quilting. That sense that when you complete something that big and that you've invested so much energy in, you really do want to say, this is when it was done and it's mine.
So most times you're carrying one float, but there's like this one here. Is that two, or are you?
Yeah. So it actually depends on how I'm feeling on the day, but so for anybody who's not quite following that question, if you're working side to side here, which you would be, you're using blue, but then you're switching to grey and carrying the blue because you need it in the middle and at the end. And then when you switch to the darker grey, you're carrying the blue and the grey behind to get to the other side, and then you want to carry the dark grey across to here. So, shall we guess? I think on that one I did carry it. I did carry the dark grey.
I think you would have. I'm saying yes.
Oh, you're wrong, Lorraine.
Oh.
Are you? Yeah. Yeah. I did it in individual blocks.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. So this is, and people often ask, is the work Intarsia or is it Fair Isle? I don't really know how I would define some of it. It's a blend of techniques at different points.
Yep.
That probably classifies more as Intarsia because I've taken two shorter strands of yarn and used them in individual spots to produce the effect rather than carrying it the whole way across, which is more like a Fair Isle technique.
But in something so small, it depends. Like if you felt comfortable, I'd just carry it.
Yeah, and that's why I say sometimes I did, and then sometimes on the day I would think, well, I could just use the other end of the ball to do that particular section.
Yeah.
those instructions in the book on how to carry the colours across?
Yes. Yeah.
So the next question, would your patterns work if you scale it? So I'm looking with fine threads, preferred versus big.
Yeah.
Can you scale them so you have like a bigger?
Yeah, you mean like just with larger yarn?
Yeah, so like instead of just a small
Yeah. One of the other things we also did in the book is show how that's possible. I knitted 3 sample blocks that sort of show the scale. It's a really small image here, but hopefully it gives you that sense. So the one on the left there is in 4-ply cotton. The one next to it is in 8-ply cotton, which isn't actually an awful lot bigger, strangely. And then the one next to it is in 8-ply wool, and it's the one in 8-ply wool feels like it's really a big scale up. But if you went to 10-ply wool, no problem. The only difference is your stitches get bigger, and so the illusion that you're creating with each of the small stitches forming pictures, you have to sort of be further back from the blanket maybe for the illusion to happen in the same way, if that makes sense. But there's the patterns will all still work perfectly with it. Yeah.
Another question about construction.
Yeah.
Because I hate construction. So,
Oh, you don't like the finishing? Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
so I'm assuming this is lots of little, like, how do you go about it? This one, well, in fact, they all look
Yeah.
different the way.
Are you joining?
Yeah, they are a little. So the joins, I usually do each block. So once I've got them all knitted, I lay them out side by side and like in the grid, and then I will sew the horizontal rows together first, so join all of the sides. But also, I think it's better to do it that way because the harder seam is the one that goes side to side. So you need to do, I prefer to do all of those first because then they're out of the way, and then the easier seam is the long one, just joining in over stitch. So side to side, I thought I was using mattress stitch until I started writing the book, and then the editor showed me images of like illustrations of mattress stitch that we were going to include in the book, and I said, that's not mattress stitch. That's not how I do it. And she said, well, I hate to tell you, but that is in fact mattress stitch. So I thought, well, then I'm using something else, and I can't have invented it. It must already exist. I discovered it's called Bickford stitch. It's sort of the sibling of mattress stitch, and you only use a half of the of each stitch to join. The positive effect is that it joins pretty seamlessly, and then at the back you also get a flat seam rather than a ridge. Yeah, so that's that part, and then the top to bottom is just over stitch. The difference is with Copenhagen, for example, there's a kind of a seamless join between the two, but with Sydney you can see there's a kind of lace work join between the two, and that's because the Sydney blocks have narrower sides, and so rather than losing a whole stitch on each side to the seam, I use the inside leg of the outside stitch, and that joins not 2 stitches side by side but 2 half stitches, and that kind of gives this jagged effect of the join, which it's a different effect. And then the Amsterdam is the same join, that kind of lacework join side to side, but then the top to bottom I wasn't sure about how to work with the skyline in Amsterdam, but I did know that I wanted this sample for the book to look different to the other projects, because there are so many different ways you can join the blocks, and I typically just go in regular grids. I wanted to try something a bit different and show people that everything is possible. So I turned them around the other way, and I like that kind of effect that they have of the mirror image. Often when you see images of the Amsterdam canal houses, you get the image of the canal houses and then the reflection in the water beneath. And I wanted that to sort of be imitated in that sense in the blanket.
Could you potentially do like long vertical strips and then just join them?
Yes, and a lot of people ask exactly that question, or have done it and shown me that they've done it. Great idea. I don't want to make that many decisions at once, because the only issue is then you have strips where you can't change the order of the colours, and I spent probably a good month once I had made all of the blocks rearranging them, starting again, photographing the ones I really liked, and then saying, right, but maybe I haven't got the best combination. I'll set them all aside and start fresh again. And then I just kept going until I could compare a few and say, but that's the one I like best. And if you make them sort of in long strips, It would definitely save some seams later on, but it would just mean you don't get that same flexibility.
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit to the border on this one?
Yeah. Oh yeah. The crochet border.
It is crochet. We thought it was.
Yeah. I wanted it. I wanted the border to be as flat and simple as possible. So I did try a couple of knitted border techniques, but I just didn't like the result as much as I liked this. It also, again, it's about flexibility. Because you join every stitch the whole way around on your first row, you can just keep doing laps around the blanket for as wide as you want it to be, and then you decide once you've made it as wide as you want it to be, that's where I'll stop. And I like that, knowing that the effort can be exhausted when you're ready, if that makes sense, rather than saying, if you do a knitted border, you might have to say, I'm going to make it this many stitches wide, and now I'll start, and then you have to work the whole way around before you realize you don't like it, which I would not be pleased about. So if I think where you can keep things flexible and optional, that I think can produce a better result. Yeah, and that's you can see on all of them I do a pretty similar border, just because I think that colour from the middle helps to pull it to the sides. It's also a technique of patchwork quilting to use that colour that sits over the top of the design that also frames it. There's something about that grid of dots that works across the blanket that helps to settle all of the colours into each other. They all kind of work together because there's this other unifying element to them. So then the border helps with that too, I guess. But it's not quite a single crochet stitch because I don't go through both parts of the stitch. I only go through the front edge of the, which I think gives a more simple finish.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I think that was so interesting. I've learned a lot, and it was lovely to chat.
Yeah, thank you for having me.